Okay, greetings everybody, greetings and salutations on Charlotte's Web. I'm Taylor Sharpe. Welcome to FileMaker Pro. This is the November 2022 meeting. We're here at the Harmonic Data Treehouse, and we're glad to be here and glad to have all of you here today. So I'm actually going to be your presenter, and we're going to talk about emailing invoices and things like that. But before we get into all of that, we're going to first talk about something that happened this last week. So this last week we had a conference that was kind of, I guess, the substitute of the big national conference because they didn't have one this year. Claris did, unfortunately. We really hope they do next year. Hint, hint, anybody from Claris if you're out there. Pause on Air was held this last month, and if you haven't been on it, it tends to be a little more of an informal type conference and a much smaller one. I think a little over 100 people there. So it certainly was a fun and interesting conference. But a number of us here from our user group went. Let's see, I went, Heather went, Greg went, and Scott went. Is that? Oh, Mike Wallace went. That's right. So Michael was there. So we were all there. So kind of before we kick things off, I wanted to have those who were at the conference do a little sharing. I know that Heather happens to have a microphone with her. So if we can get Heather to share first, I can figure out how to change my camera. Okay. Just a second.
Heather's got a great singing voice.
Not. Definitely not.
Okay.
Well, one of my coworkers said before I came out here this morning that if there's anyone who knows Heather, they know that she has no trouble recalling memories and sharing them. So my experience at PAWS this year was great. I got to speak this year, did a session. Basically, I did the session that I did for you all last month, only abbreviated, and I brought some show and tell so you could see. You all saw it on a presentation, a keynote deck, but I did it as an old school flip chart show with things where we actually had to, write in the answers as we went along for different things, because I wanted to plan for no tech and no electricity, because last year, of course, we ran out of power. Well, it didn't run out, it just went out. It just stopped on us one night at dinner. So I redesigned it so that things like the minimum value products and the pyramid that I shared with you that looked all nice with all kinds of colors was a more interactive thing where we went through them one by one, and I actually wrote them on the board here. I had about 25 people and got to speak in the amphitheater. That was pretty cool. And the Kentuckiana user group was doing a 2-hour Zoom session with PAWS. And so I was asked to share, if I would share my session. So while there was no digital material in my session and literally old school speaker notes on 5x8 cards that I had to follow, actually worked out really well. I cautioned everyone at the beginning that the last time I used speaker notes that weren't on a screen, because I've gotten really good over the years at being able to, look at speaker notes, my keynote notes, and engage the audience without anyone noticing so much that I'm reading. But I haven't done this for like 40 years, So everyone gave me a little bit of leeway on that, and it was great. I think it was actually better than a digital presentation. It was more engaging because it was really just me talking. There was a little bit of visual, but it was really more me engaging with other attendees. And there was a lot of feedback and a lot of questions. And so that was, for me, that was great. I also brought with me a lot of the books that I use, and people were very interested in those. They came up and took pictures of them so that they could get some of the books. So that for me was real exciting to be able to share with them and for them to all be very interested in it. And then, of course, the sessions I attended, the first one I attended was yours, Taylor, which was awesome. Taylor chose as his venue because at Pause, we're at a retreat in the mountains, and we have like a tree house, we have a lake, we have an amphitheater, big basketball court, a lot of different places, library, where we can hold sessions and interact with people. And he chose by the lake. So we literally sat in Adirondack chairs on the lawn right next to the lake. So it was very comfortable atmosphere. One of the things I love about Pause is that casual atmosphere allows you to have real conversations. They don't have to be techie conversations. They can be, you know, how are you doing? You know, last year there was a lot of discussion, for example, about what it was like, you know, as we were starting to come out of the pandemic. For many people, this was the first opportunity to interact face to face with any, you know, allies, you know, out there. And this year was, you know, a little farther removed from the pandemic than last year, but still much the same, where people are just able to interact with their cohorts and talk about whatever's going on in their business or with their projects or whatever. So I really enjoy it. And one of the things about Pause is that there's so much more time available. There aren't as many sessions, hence it doesn't cost as much either. It's a much more pleasant environment, and there's a lot of time built in. So like at DevCon, you have a session, it's 50 minutes, and you have 10 or 15 minutes to get to the next session that you want to attend, and then 10 to 15 minutes before the next thing. And you know, there's no time to really interact with people unless you skip a session. And that happens a lot, for me anyway, at DevCon, where there's a session slot where I just end up going to nothing because I finally got a hold of somebody I want to talk to. We end up talking, and then it's too late. We run out of time and miss our session. So that doesn't happen at Pause. There were a lot of pop-up sessions, like my husband attended this year, and he wanted to talk about Claris Studio. And so, you know, he raised up his hand, put up his whiteboard, and said he wanted to suck the marrow out of Claris Studio. And he was approached within the next hour by one of the engineers from Claris who works on Claris Studio. And then he spoke with 2 or 3 other people from Claris. And then somebody that afternoon decided to do a whole session on Claris Studio. And that was held in the middle dining area, at middle dining hall. And there were probably 20 people there. So that's the kind of thing that can just pop up at Pause that you wouldn't have the opportunity for at something like a DevCon. So anyway, I enjoyed it very much, and I will definitely look forward to going again. That's enough about me.
Yes, very much is an unstructured conference. Yes. We kind of have some sessions, but things do get broke off a lot. And it's a very low-tech conference. Occasionally, some people did presentations with their laptop, but literally if you're going to do it with your laptop, it's, you know, how many people you can get around you. And so that it certainly, you can't plan on having a big group if it's how many people can stare over your shoulder. So most of the presentations were just talking, just oral. And I did mine. I was holding my laptop in front of me to kind of prompt me what I need to talk about, but nobody could even see what I was doing. So it was all very much low-tech stuff. I'll say I really had a good time. Part of why I go, well, a lot of reason why I go is networking. It's good to meet other people in the community and see who they are. I'll be honest with you, it's a time I can sit down and corner some of the Apple staff that show up there and really talk about what's happening, what they can talk about, and then sometimes ask some questions that they don't, you can tell they're not allowed to talk about. Anyway, it's certainly fun to get to meet them and talk about, see some of the directions going. I will say they are being more open and transparent than they used to, say, a decade ago, on where they're going with things in studio. Because, you know, the old days, they wouldn't tell you anything until voila, the whole thing's here, and you know. And at that point, there wasn't changing anything or suggesting anything or whatever. So
I also felt like it's an environment where, unlike DevCon, you feel more on par with your peers, right? So at DevCon, there's certain people who are, I don't want to say they're like FileMaker royalty, but they're You're
Michael
the-
royalty.
Rock stars.
Yeah, the rock stars. You know some of the people that I'm talking about, right? I won't name them by name, but you know
We
who
know.
they are.
That's
You know
fine.
who
I'm
they are.
humble enough not to talk about it. So.
Right, but at pause, in part because it's a more relaxed environment and in part because there's just a lot more time. And there were so few people. I mean, there were, I think it was around 120 attendees this year. Still a good number of people, but it's a small enough group over the course of, 2.5-ish days that I felt like I was able to have conversations with some of these rock stars, if you will, and it wasn't like trying to approach them at a DevCon where you've got 20, 30 other people trying to get their attention as well.
Like where else are you going to be able to sit down and sing with Bob Bowers?
Exactly, right. Well, I wouldn't because that would be an embarrassment for me, but my husband did. But exactly, so I sat across the table from Bob Bowers and at one of our meals, and we had a real nice conversation, and that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, at DEF CON. So that, for those of us who suffer from imposter syndrome occasionally, that was nice. That was nice for me.
Yeah.
Somebody else is talking about how they got to sit down at the table with Heather McHugh.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The famous Heather. Let's see, Michael or Greg, you guys want to share a little bit about your pause experience?
I'll let Michael go first.
Yeah, I think I can just second a lot of what y'all said. It was relaxing. It was they work at having you leave more of your technology behind, that kind of stuff. And but it was also there's like one of my favorite sessions was about perfection. What was it? Perfection is the enemy of good, or whatever it was. But that kind of morphed into more of a conversation about getting stuck on little things and stuff like that, and how a lot of programmers are kind of on the spectrum or whatever. So we kind of can get stuck on something and how to move on and stuff like that, and kind of the pros and cons of the perfection, like having an end goal, have a perfect end goal, so to speak, but not get so deep, try to get perfection on all the little individual icons, or whatever, small little things. But anyways, so that was good. Same thing, got to spend time with some of the guys, Todd and stuff like that, and so it was enjoyable.
I got to throw water balloons. I've never done that before.
Hey, we had the sheriff.
Time for everything.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that the first thing that really caught me was just how deep in the woods we really were with this thing. I mean, you've seen anybody who's not been there. If you've seen some of Taylor's pictures, it's really only scratching the surface. I mean, this place is in the bottom of a narrow valley, and we stayed in a bunkhouse, and the trip to the bunkhouse from the main building, which is on the floor of the valley, was it was a bit of exercise that I was not anticipating. So we had to sort of try and channel our 30-year-old selves in order to be able to get through that. But beautiful, obviously, scenery. The scenery was great. It's not something you get with typical DevCon, or really any kind of conference that I've ever been to. And the facilities were nice. The people who worked there, it was seemed like a minimal crew, but they handled it well, and they were really friendly. So that being said, the one thing that really struck me was that while there were a lot of your sort of very I don't want to say standard, but you're sort of what you would expect from a DevCon or Engage sort of presentation, like what Taylor gave, something very focused on technology and how we do things. But there were also a lot like what Michael was just talking about, that were basically more about like sort of life strategies and talking about the things that we all really deal with on a day-to-day basis, doing what we do. And it doesn't necessarily even have anything to do with being a developer. It's just like Michael said about the perfection, it was more about just a strategy for understanding that the things like being on the spectrum, which makes us actually well suited to doing the kind of work that we do, we still have challenges, right? And how everybody deals with those challenges and the strategies that they have. It was great to have a room full of people talking about their different experiences with it, and it was very eye-opening. And then on top of that, there is a bunch of free time built in for things where you can just kind of ad hoc get together, talk about whatever you want to. You can walk around the property, lots of great things to see, like Taylor was just showing, or jump on Taylor's one wheel and see if you can't hurt yourself that way. And then we ended the night with the campfire, which was great. I actually got to spend quite a bit of time getting to know Heather quite a lot better than I did before. And that was really exciting to me, because I think that Heather and I really have only, despite the fact that we've been in FMPUG together, I think we've really only talked at conferences. Like when I talk about talking, I mean, just having an in-depth conversation. That was great to meet Heather and her husband, and as well as a bunch of other people. Scott Schley and I both shut down the conference both nights. We were very proud to say we were the last ones to leave the bonfire, and we were very proud that we sort of maximized our exposure while we were there to all the different folks that were there. And for those of you who are to follow up on what, and I don't want to hold this up for too long, so I'm just going to say this one last thing. For the people who talk about the rock stars who were there, it was very telling at the very end, when it was sort of the wrap up, the last morning that we were there, to see Todd Geist get choked up talking about what it was like being there for him. And I thought that was that really sort of brought home that we're sort of all, despite our various levels of successes or various levels of exposure in the community, we all sort of very much appreciate this sort of grounding that we get from exposures, from experiences like this. So it was good.
Okay, thank you, Greg and Michael and Heather and everyone. It was certainly some fun times and learned and networked a bunch. So, okay, so we're gonna switch gears here, and we are going to talk about invoicing and HTML. So I'm going to do a little, let me see, quick photos here. Yeah, that's on the mountain right behind the camp we were at.
Is that your Mad Max gear? Your post-apocalyptic?
Oh yeah,
outfit?
when I wheel, I'm a wimp. If I fall, I make sure I don't want to get hurt much. So that's about the only time you see me without my helmet on too. So so anyway, but it was fun. I think we got about 8 people to ride the wheel, which is pretty unusual. So most people can't figure it out. It certainly isn't easy.
And it was really fun to watch.
Yeah,
Really fun to watch people
other people trying
it.
So.
And Taylor came back from going off the mountain, and we drove up together. So he, like, when he took off to go to these mountain trails by himself, I'm like, man, I hope that he comes back. You know.
Well, I was counting on Michael. I was counting on you to come rescue me if something happened.
Yeah, I told you when you left, I said I can call a helicopter. That's about all I can do. So
he does the same thing on snow, I should tell you, going into the woods on his snowboard.
Come on, Dennis, follow me. Okay, so switching gears here. Hopefully you guys see my screen here. I've downloaded an invoice solution here from the marketplace. I even forget, I think this is from iSolutions or something, but we wanted to talk about sending invoices. And of course, in FileMaker world, we've been sending invoices forever. Of course, we were printing them forever. And then of course, at some point we got to the point where most of us developers were creating a PDF and attaching it to email, which was great for printing. And so I wanted to talk about, what kind of the latest incarnation of some people's expectations are, that when you get the email, it comes already HTML formatted and looks a little, it's just not a plain text email. It's got your company logo and, a couple other things that make it look good. I'm going to assume in doing this that everybody here are developers. FileMaker developers, but I'm going to assume that you only develop with FileMaker, and things outside of FileMaker like APIs, JavaScript, and things like that are things that are probably not your strong suit. And I think that's probably a majority of a lot of FileMaker developers. They know things within FileMaker, but you know, if you try to do some of these outside of it, it gets in the uncomfort zone. So to progress here, a couple things I want to talk about. First of all, if we're going to be sending HTML emails, we need a method to send them. And so that's the first part that we're going to end up on. And so if you've been using FileMaker, you know, well, I can send emails. Well, the problem is you can't send HTML emails. You can send an email, but in fact, Claris's idea of we've really progressed is, oh, we can have multiple attachments. Anyway, which I don't think was very progressive. So, so we need to look outside of native FileMaker to do those. And the traditional way we did that is we've had a number of plugins out there that have supported them. CNS, who's local here, has had a good one. 360 Works does. Draco Mail out there, and Monkey Bread Software. All of these will let you connect to your SMTP server and send HTML emails and multiple attachments, and that's wonderful. Except the issue at that point usually is, you know, a lot of us developers, we don't mind working with a plugin ourselves, but trying to get all of our end users to have a plugin that's kept current and is on their computer is a little bit more of a pain. And so we're generally trying to avoid those. So this is about trying to look for solutions outside of that. And of course, the new way that technology that mail is going, at least according to Microsoft and Google and stuff, is it's all going towards RESTful APIs, and then someday SMTP and POP and IMAP will go away, and it'll all be APIs. And believe me, it'll take a decade for that to happen, if not longer. But you know, it's that direction's already started. And so my solution for doing that is using SendGrid. But there are a lot of other options out there to do it. I use SendGrid mostly because SendGrid is designed for sending out, you know, mass emails, for example, a newsletter. But it also happens to be very good if you want to send out a whole bunch of company invoices and statements and things like that. And so it is certainly useful for that. But in the solution we're going to talk about today, obviously you can use something other than SendGrid. But SendGrid is similar to probably more well-known thing is MailChimp. MailChimp offers additional things. It offers templates, and for you to store the data on there, they'll basically be your database for you. But my view of things, a MailChimp is, if I'm in FileMaker, I already have a database. I don't need a MailChimp database. So why do I want to pay MailChimp for it? So I went SendGrid to be cheap, because it was the lesser expensive. I think you can get in for under 20 bucks a month with a limit of about 100,000 emails. It seems to be pretty reasonable for most people there. So this is the one that I like and jumped on. But if you happen to be an Amazon guy, Amazon, what's it, Simple Email Service or something like that, there's a Amazon one too that is actually slightly less expensive than SendGrid. So obviously lots of options out there. And you can actually use Google's API to send things, but there's all kinds of issues when you're using their API to send things, because they're trying to limit what you can do, whereas these guys are trying to help you get lots out. So, you know, when Google puts limits, say, oh, we don't want you to send more than 200 emails a day from this email. Like, well, when I'm trying to, you know, blast my email list of 500 customers, it ain't gonna work. So SendGrid's real good at that. Another thing, a little plug on SendGrid is if you turn it on, it lets you track when people open an email. Basically, it has a little graphic in there that when it calls the graphic remotely, it records that someone opened it. And then second of all, if you click on any buttons in there, it records that they click on it. So what's kind of convenient sometimes is when you send something out and say, well, I sent you an invoice, and someone says, well, I didn't get it. And it's like, you got it on so-and-so day, and you clicked on it 5 times the next day. You didn't get it? Anyway, not to call people's bluff, but, you know, checks in the mail, you know. So anyway, those are some useful things on it. But basically all it is you're using FileMaker's insert from URL and some curl coding to do it. And if you would like to get the SendGrid, because this presentation isn't about SendGrid, but if you would like to get the SendGrid template as well as any of my other templates, you can just go to my tms.us/capital M, and this takes you over to all the templates you can download. We got our audits, QR codes. Here's SendGrid right here, and then a bunch of other ones that you might find useful or not. They're all free to download, no licensing fees or anything to them. So this is just one of the options that are out there that you can copy, and just the intent is that you copy the script and or file structure into your solution. It's not an end solution. It's something you just copy and make use of. So so SendGrid's what I'm using, and of course here is I just went to the marketplace to say give me an invoice, and so this is one that's I downloaded this one because I think it was the first one I saw that was free. So iSolutions, thank you for a free sample when I did. I tried Richard Carlton Consulting, and they didn't like my email, and I couldn't get it to send. So I was sending Richard an email to complain that his company doesn't like me anymore. So anyway, hopefully I haven't lost the RCC love, but anyway. So here is a solution that has some fake clients, some fake products, some fake staff, and some fake names, and all we're going to look at is invoicing. So if you're wanting to send HTML email, one of the basics is that you have to get outside of your FileMaker comfort zone. Is you have to write some some HTML, and that is a comfort zone that a lot of people aren't wanting to get into. However, for simple emails that you want to do to your clients, you can keep HTML at a real simple level and be able to achieve these types of things. And so a couple of things is, hopefully some of you are familiar with JSON now, because we have name value pairs going, and that's kind of the latest thing since FileMaker 16. Some of you are a little more comfortable with that. So if you haven't done HTML, it actually is real, at least the basics are real simple. Obviously HTML can get immensely complicated, but get the basics. All you have to do is say, I'm writing HTML. So there's HTML tag open, and you can have headers and stuff too, which I'm going to even skip over for now and just go to the body. And this is like the body of your message, and you can put whatever you want in the body. And then when you want to end a tag, like we want to end the body tag, you just put a slash in front of it so that this right here ends what you started here. Now we also started this. And so this is, just think of it as parentheses or brackets within FileMaker calculations. You have to open and close them. And so if you look right now, we say, making something here, I'll do this. Hello, header. Okay, so this is HTML. I'll jump over here into my preview, and there is HTML. So how am I seeing this? Well, of course, we have web viewers in FileMaker. So one of the tricks, if you want to preview what you're doing, is to create a web viewer. So you have your raw HTML that you put in, and then I have a little tab over here that has the HTML. A little trick that you have to know is you have to put this little thing in front of your invoices. It's basically kind of like if you're using JSON, you have to tell it, the text type or how things are encoded. Well, this has to go before things that are HTML. And so it's just, if you've done insert from URL, you're probably used to doing that in the headers, but this is what has to go in front of it. It says we're submitting some data. It's going to be in text format, and the format is HTML, comma, and then you put your HTML, and then it'll work for you. So that's the most important thing for getting a little preview in FileMaker. And so if you do that, now we've got a preview of what we did here. Okay, well, that's great, except for I want an invoice where I have hello Heather. so we need to start writing some things to actually do that. One of the first things you want to do is, I want a company logo. Okay. Well, some of you smarty pants in the HTML world say, well, I can just embed a logo. And actually, technically, with base64, yes, you can do that. Makes your HTML much more complicated. And by the way, a whole lot of web viewers will not read your encoded um, uh, um, pictures that you do with it encoded. So basically, generally avoid including your trying to include the picture in your HTML. Instead, make it as a reference. So a reference is something that is available on a web graphic page that exists out there. So this means your company logo has to exist on the web somewhere, and usually where it exists is on your web page. So if you don't already have it out, you can go to your web page and put it on the get it from there. If you don't have a web page that you can put your company logo on, by the way, if you're running a FileMaker server, you have web pages. And so there's the htdocs folder. You can put things in your htdocs area, and presto, anything you put there is now available on the web like a web page. So you can actually run your own, put your own web pages out there if you want to do it in FileMaker. And it's awful easy. In fact, I'll give you a little example of this real quick. I'll log into my server. Oh, put the right password in. So I am assuming that you guys are developers and you're somewhat familiar with FileMaker Server. And in FileMaker Server has a folder. And over here, it is slightly different in Unix, but at least in the Mac and Windows, it's called HTTP Server. There's a slightly different name in the Unix. But everything that's in here is what is about your web service. And in your htdocs folder is where anything that you put out here shows up. So, for example, my server is at fm.tms.us. So if I look up here and I see on the htdocs here, I see testpage.png. If I see testpage.png, that's the image. That's all that when you go to those FileMaker web pages that are showing up, it's just whatever's in this folder. You can put anything you want in your folder. You can make your whole company web page in this folder if you wanted to. I think FileMaker discourages you doing a whole lot of other. FileMaker's or Claris's recommendation is that you only have FileMaker and nothing else on yours. But since you already have the web server, you are welcome to put as much as you want in there. I will tell you, there's also an HTTPS root. So if you have your SSL certificate, anything in here will only show up if you go to HTTPS instead of HTTP. So, but you could have the same thing. See this test page here, this test page graphic right here. If I just come up here and if I take it out or add the SN, it's finding both of them, but it's going between those two different folders to find this one and this one. So you can put anything in here, including your company logo. And let's see, I will try to put some company logo or something in here. Let's see. Let's see. Where do I have my TMS logo? Okay, there's some logo. Let's see if that's the small one. Yeah, it's reasonably small. Okay, I'll stick this one out here. I'll stick it over here. Copies over here onto my server. I'll stick it in here, and now I'll even make it shorter so that I don't have to type the whole thing. I have TMS PNG. So now if I'm on a web browser, I can go up here and type in tms.png. Hey, there's my logo, presto. Okay, now we know we can get to it in a web browser. Great. I want it in my invoice. Or that's the whole reason we're here. So basically, I know this URL right here is something I want in my invoice. So you're going to come over here to your raw HTML. And instead of this, you have to learn a couple other things about HTML. If you want to insert an image, it's called image source equals, and you put double quotes and whatever it is that you want it to go to, and then you have to do your bracket close. So you have your bracket open, there's your bracket close. You say image source equals, and this is the name of the image where it's at. Come over here to our preview. Voila! Now we have something. Now, if I'm making an invoice, I have something here. Okay, so I have my logo, but now I'm going to want to do some other things, like I'm going to want to, tell me who I'm, this invoice is for, what the company is, and things like that. So I always in the raw HTML try to make it work here first, and then I go to FileMaker calculation engine to try to reproduce what I do. So here's where something also about HTML. HTML does not care about white space. So if you put one space or you put 500 spaces, it's going to only space one space. Or you put one tab or 10 tabs, it's only going to give you one space. Tabs become spaces. If you do a carry return, it just ignores it. You have to give the code for a break for it to do it. Otherwise, you don't get it. So I'm going to throw some carry returns in here to separate out things, so just make it a little more readable. So, but adding white space doesn't change anything. It still looks the same. Other than I can now come down here and say, I want to create a paragraph, and I want to say, give a company name, and I'm going to do a line break, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street, and I'm going to give another break, BR's break, and I'm going to say somewhere Texas 750XX, and then I'm going to end my paragraph with a /P. So paragraph began here, paragraph ended. And I'm welcome to, if I want to make things look a little better, I can just put carry returns after that. But HTML doesn't care because it's not looking at those carry returns. The only thing that it knows to do a break is if you put the break in here. So if you don't have those in there, so now if you look down here, we've got a company name and we got break. So if I were to take that break out, even though I have a carry return there, company name and address end up on the same line. That's not what you want. So remember to do breaks if you want to do things. So keep in mind that when you do a paragraph, it kind of gives you some spacing between it. So in this case here, you can see here's one paragraph and this is the paragraph above. So there, it kind of gives a little space between it. If you just do a BR for break, the lines are right next to each other, which is what you want in an address. So paragraphs are literally for starting a new paragraph. Breaks are if you want things to be right next to each other in the carry return. So just think of a break as a carry return that's not starting a new paragraph. So anyway, that's some real basic HTML. So we're going to at some point say, I want to say, dear Heather, and you'll probably have some paragraph in there. Pay up. Okay, except for we now want to tell what to pay up. So if you're going to do things, I will tell you, if you're a real web developer, you're going to chuckle at this. This is old school using tables. The new school stuff is going to do it all in CSS, and it's going to look a lot better. So if you have a web developer that'll come and do your CSS for you, great. If you're just trying to get something out that will work and look, semi-professional, you don't need that. You can do your own table. So I'm going to give you an example of a table I did. Let's see.
Tables are the most compatible for email clients.
Yes, and that's one of the comments we have here. Tables are the most compatible for email. Emails clients are notorious for not being full web browser supported. The simpler you keep your email, the more likely your client can read it. So if you use advanced CSS and everything, some of your clients won't be able to read it. So you have to then provide options for if you can't read it, click here to open your browser and those kind of things. So those, you can have workarounds for them, but if you want it to just work, keep it simple. Simple is much better in the email things, and just using tables makes things a lot simpler. So I've got a table here that I'm going to show you that I'm just going to copy that I put in mine to show how a table works. So we're going to come back to what we were working on. So a couple of things about tables, I guess before I do that, right, I have to get that stuff up down. And FYI, some browsers will forgive you when you make minor mistakes like that. Others won't. But do it right. You don't have to worry about it. But in this case here, you can see I created a table. This is where I was doing my company logo and stuff up front in a table. And basically a table that's two columns. Here's column 1 was my image. Column 2, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Didn't mean to click on it. Column 2 was the text information you have here. So before we do that, though, I'm going to give you a little lesson in tables here. So we're going to get rid of what we have here. I will tell you one thing that is useful: cell padding, to give some padding around things so that your letters aren't literally squished right against the corner is very useful, as well as whether or not you want a border on it. So we open with a table, and we can have such things as cell padding and border, and then we want to do a table. So how do we do a table? So tables are all just like we have paragraphs and breaks. We have ways that you start a line. I think of it as a line or a row. You just say TR, which I think R stands for row. So in the table, we're starting a row, and we're going to start, we need to have a header. So TH is header. And so we're going to have, something, and we have to close our TH, and then we have to do another TH for, what comes something else, TH, TH, last, TH. So we've separated everything. Kind of, you think of tabs with those THs, and then you end with your /TR, and now you have a table header. So I come over here, look, I have something else last, so that's making a simple table right there. It's just as simple as that. And so now you got your header. So of course I want to do an invoice. So I'm wanting to add some things like numbers and amounts down here. So say we wanted to say, instead of this, we'd have description, and they have quantity, let's see, quantity, and then price, something like that. That would go along with what we have up here in our invoice. So typical stuff. So if we look over here, we see description, quantity, price. Okay, now we need to put something down below. So we need to do TRs again. But when you do the lines for the TRs, instead of TH was header, TD is for data. So you're putting data in. Description is, in this case here, what's our first thing? Steel cassette. Okay. Steel cassette. And,
Taylor,
yes, sir.
on your table declaration, you left the quotes off of the 10 on cell padding, and FileMaker's web viewer is apparently tolerating that, but there's a lot of email clients out there that won't.
Yes, you're supposed to have quotes around them. Yes, as was noted, if you there is some forgiveness, but it doesn't always forgive you. So okay, so we have some more TDs. So we have a quantity, say 2, and then a price. What do they say up here? 160. 160, and we can't type /td. Okay, and we end our row with /tr, so that ends our row. So we got table start, table row for headers, table row for data, and I'm gonna just copy a second one here. So we got 2 rows of data right here. So we got headers, data, data, and table close. And so if we come over here, what do you know? We see stuff here. You'll notice, why didn't we get price? Did I do price?
Does it need to be enclosed for this number?
There's an opening tag in this.
I miss that. See? And don't worry, whenever you're doing this, that's why you go to preview, because you'll constantly be doing little things like that that don't work. Even more challenging is when they work when they shouldn't, and then that, you know, is I guess Scott was saying, then sometimes it doesn't work on some of your clients' computers. But anyway, so really all you're doing in creating these rows and data is you're creating a bunch of different rows right here of what all you're purchasing, and says we can just use something else. In this case here, it's water bottle, and
So Taylor, I may be jumping ahead, but I'm assuming that you have a calc or something that will build that from your actual lines.
well, that's where we got to go next.
Okay.
Okay. And so the purpose of doing this here is that I always recommend you get your HTML working the way you want it to work in the raw HTML. And then next, you go try to make a calculation that generates it. So yes, you could go right to the calculation if you're really good. I run into problems doing that, because then when it doesn't render, it renders nothing, and you just, well, where was my error? And invariably there were like 5 errors, but you know. So one of the things I can do with a lot of these things is we can at this point say, hey, you know, once I've got my HTML the way I want it, then we can go to my data viewer, and this is where I build the calc. I don't build it in the script of the calculation first. I do it in the calc first, where we watch some calculation, and we see if I'm able to duplicate the same thing here that will work by each of the things here. So what we have on the left is what we want, and what we have over here on the right is what we're going to generate. So to start off with, can name these things different things, but I could say our header is going to be something like we need our HTML, our body, and then our image source equals HTTPS. Okay, but remember, since we're in a FileMaker calculation, we have to put the backward slashes in front of the double quotes. So, and then that's the header that we want to get started with. That won't change. It'll stay. It's static and not dynamic. So if we have a header here, come over here on our data viewer, say, you know, give me a result. So here's our result here. If we want, we can also add returns in there for visibility, but that doesn't matter to FileMaker. Okay, so we got a header there, and now we want to have a company name. So we want to do this paragraph that's going to be the company name. So invoices, let's see what's related to invoices, I guess clients. So hopefully there's a company name in here somewhere. Name. So I'm going to assume, I'm going to just call this company here, COM, whatever. So we will say for company, we're going to want a company name. So obviously that will be the name here. And so, but we're going to want an address. So we'll probably want to have company name, we'll probably have address, which is billing, billing street. city, and of course you guys can clean up the state. And I won't even put a zip in there. Okay, so we've now created company.
COM.
Helps. There we go. Okay, so now we got company. Except for how does FileMaker handle your carry returns? Well, it doesn't, so we need to put breaks in there. So once we create your company here, we need to now go to COM and substitute COM. We're going to substitute every carry return with a break. And I'll put another carry return just so they look good. And now what you see is we have the breaks in here so that we have the company name the way we want. So we're moving along in our body here. So we're going to list our header and our company. And we're going to have a body right now.
It's like a lunch thing for them.
And you might want to, around company, begin it with a paragraph so it's in its own paragraph. That way it'll move further down. So you have to put the paragraph markers outside it. And I didn't do something right. There we go. So now we're having a little more HTML right here. We've got our HTML open, our body open. We've got an image, got our logo, and we got a company name here. And so we're kind of following what we have over here. So we got the header right here. We've got the company name that's showing up. So getting some improvement here. Now we need a dear Heather, or dear whoever they have in here. So we need to continue on our body. So we could probably just add it here. And of course, you can do conditionals if there is no name and things like that. But let's see, is there a billing contact? There's a person. So you can say, dear, whatever, and then semicolon and slash paragraph in the paragraph. And so now if you look over here, we're starting to look a little more like we look over here on the left. So we got our header, we got our logo, we got our company, and we've got our dear. And we want to start, you can have whatever sentence you want to do that you can do. And of course, obviously we're in the FileMaker calculation engine, so you can do all the, if so-and-so companies say this, if they're past due more than 90 days, say this. You can do all kinds of things to add to the body. Now I want to get down to the table. So here's where we want to do our table. And so we wanted to open table up, table cell padding equal 10, order equal 1. Okay, so there's our table open, and I'll also give our header too. So our header is TRTH, description, close our TH, open our TH, description, quantity, close our TH, open our TH, or header, TH for H for header, price, /TH, and we end that. And in theory, we now have the beginnings.
To escape your quotes.
Yes, I do. There we go. That's why we had lots of developers here. Because every formula I write is in script that's perfect the first time, right?
That's right, always.
Okay, so now we got the first part of what we want over here. So I guess we could now say our body can now be equals list body and our new table. And so if we come down here, we're starting to even get better at this. So now we have our, everything has been set up, and we're now down to our table here. And now we're down to my favorite part of the FileMaker calculation, the while calculation. So if you're going to have rows, you're going to have things looped. So there are different ways you could have used a script to go through and get things. You can use SQL. You can do various things to get these different rows. But basically, whatever rows you're going to do, you're going to have to get with probably some type of while. So hopefully you guys are familiar with what's going to call it while, and then we're going to maybe what do we call it, line items. I might cheat real quick and have
Would you mind, can you put in the while function with it spelling out what the parameters need to be?
sure.
Just for reference, you can comment that out, but
It helps. Those of you who haven't done while, I love it. But,
I get it when I get into it,
uh-huh.
using it, but I still need to be reminded of what I shouldn't forget,
Right.
right?
Yep. So I guess on our while here, we can say loop equals 0, loops equal value count, a list of the primary IDs of the items table. So that's how many loops we're going to do. So remember, so we're in a relationship here from the invoice to line items. So I looked over, did a list of all line items, and now I counted them. And that tells me how many loops I'm going to have to do. And then our output is going to be our rows that we're going to do. So different people do the loops formatting differently. This is just how I do it. And the mathematicians like to use in instead of loops, but I like a word because it means something to me. But I know your son probably snickers at me, Heather, for spelling out word like loop.
Yeah, he uses
Hey,
tildes
Jeremy.
and things too. Yeah.
So we're going to increment through our loops. And
I like human readable code.
yes.
Human readable.
And human readable means that I can read it, not a mathematician.
Right. They're not humans.
Jeremy can read things that it's like, what did you just read?
There's some kind of machine in human skin.
Okay.
Well, he's not here, so.
He may be listening to our recording, so.
Yeah, I guarantee you he's sound asleep right now.
I'm going to do it this way here. And if you haven't done whiles before and want to do a lesson on, we do have a whole thing last year that we did on them. But so here's our, we've got our keys. So basically, keys are really rows, but anyway. So our key that we're going to get when we're going through this, so we're now going through a loop. So on my first loop, I want to get value of the keys, whatever the loop number is that we're on. In this case here, I want to get the price and quantity and description from that. So there are different ways to do this. I usually do it through some JSON thing, but I'm just going to do a SQL here. So we're going to say select description, what was it? Quantity and price. What was the price thing?
Taylor, I would mention that in production, you don't want to be hard coding those field names.
This is all just to make this work. So certainly you want to make it resilient. Go see my resilient presentation, resilient SQL. Where the primary key is result equals execute SQL. We're going to execute that SQL, separate everything by carry return, and this will be our key. So now we're basically going to have a return result that are carry return delimited with description equals get value of result. The first item, the second one, this is the order that we did it in the select. So description, quantity, amount. So description quantity is going to be get value result. Keep in mind, we're not taking into account if you do descriptions that have carry returns in them or other, there are all kinds of other things. This is just to get this working. So now we want to create our row. So we now have description, quantity, amount, and we want to make our row. So our row is going to be, we want to start off with TR because we're creating a row. And then our TD is the first data, which is going to be description. And then we're going to close our data, open our data again, and we're going to say, and we want the, what was the next? Quantity. And slash TD, close the data, now open the data, and amount. And we need to close our data and close our row. So now we have a row, and now we can do output equals list of output and row. And so we're building our table here. So let's go see what our data looks like now. Didn't work. Let's see what we did here. If we're getting the keys right, we're getting keys, and getting loops. SQL. Okay, let's see. Result. Oh, we are getting a result. So description. We're getting a description. We're getting a quantity. And we're getting an amount. What's wrong with our row? Row. TD, TR, TD, slash TD, TD.
Your loop less than loops shouldn't be loop greater than loops.
No, it should be
Or-
less. Yeah.
Because your loop increases.
That's correct.
Oh, that's for continuing, not for
So,
stopping.
yes,
Okay.
we're continuing. Yeah.
See, that's where I get the recursive and the while mixed up. The
Oh,
conditions
here we
are
go.
to continue.
It helps if you spell things right. Things are very, very picky. Okay, so here we go. Now we got our rows. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
So we're now at this point here where we can now come down and add to our body equals list of body, and now we've added our data. And so if we come down here, and if we spell it right, yeah, I still don't have something right.
Taylor,
You can take
Yeah.
out the commented while.
shouldn't your while loop be loop is less than or equal to loops instead of less than? Otherwise, it doesn't get the last value.
It's getting all of them here.
Yeah, no, you don't need, because of where he's putting
I put it up front before it gets things.
Right.
if you put it at the end, the loop equals loop plus one, then you have to do the
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed that. Okay, my bad.
And that just shows that you can do this multiple ways. And so, so don't think this is the only way you can do your incrementing of your numbers. You can do it before you do your thing, or you can do it after. And so that was the point that Scott's making there. And when you follow behind other developers, you have to look and see, because whatever way you do it, they probably will do it differently. Okay, so we now have our table in here. So we need to also end our table. So let's slash end our table. And then we can also end our body and end our HTML. And in theory, we now have something that if we use this formula, hopefully we're going to find out, and if I use this HTML calculation right here, so if I put what we did in the data viewer right in here. This is my HTML calc field, which I put right here. In theory, we have this right here. So let's see if that shows up right in the preview. Now that was the raw text, so we need to change this to use the HTML calc field. Okay, so there's, it didn't do it. What did we do wrong here?
That's right.
I mean, you're still in layout mode.
Oh, I'm in layout mode. Ha, 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 ha. Okay, so now we have the basics of starting an HTML email. So obviously you're going to want to format your logos right and include different wording and stuff. But as you can see here, you can, with FileMaker text controls and whiles and stuff like that, you can create your own HTML invoices that you can then send out to people. And it looks a whole lot more professional, of course, tidied up a little more than this, but you can, do such things as tell it to align right and how many show dollars and symbols and decimals and things like that. So there are a lot of things you can do to obviously clean this up. But this is the basics for, I want to make an HTML email that when I'm sending my invoices out has all of the stuff right in the email and it looks good. And then you can use a program like, well, you can use a plugin or you can use something like SendGrid that I do to send things, and that will get your work through there. So anyway, that's kind of all the presentation was, to kind of walk through creating HTML with FileMaker so that you can then send it off. And in the case of, FileMaker developers, a common need is, obviously doing invoicing. So you might find that something useful to give it a whirl. And any questions out there before we wind things down?
Just one comment, Taylor. On HTML emails, it's also standard practice to send the plain text version of that email, so that if the recipient has HTML email turned off in their email client, that they'll still be able to read it.
And that's
I'm kind of curious.
That's not done at the HTML level. That'll be done over here with how you're sending it. So your plugin or your SendGrid is where you would do it.
Okay, and the question I was about to ask was, how do you, so for the plain text version, would you attach a PDF, or what would you do to work around the limitations of plain text?
Well, what I do, and I have a custom function I do that converts HTML to plain text. So I just call my custom function and it converts it to text. And, no, it's not as pretty as the HTML, but it's all readable. It breaks things down just into paragraphs. So
Can I make a comment, Taylor?
Sure.
I got to bail out in a few minutes for something else, so I can't wait until the end for this. I've never in 25 years of sending invoices by email needed to do anything other than a PDF attachment, because most people want to either print it out and put it in their file cabinet or move it somewhere else. But it just seems to me that the monthly meeting notices that you're sending out every month for the FMPUG meetings are a better example of the use of HTML and email than an invoice.
Well, newsletters, all types of things like that, calendars, anything that you're doing a mass email, you can use FileMaker to use its text control functions to generate HTML for all kinds of reasons. Invoicing is just one of them. But yes, the newsletter you get on the that we do for the FMPUG one is just FileMaker generates the HTML, and you'll see it, put your name and your email in it. And I think for some of you, put your company logo and picture in there just to show that we can. But
Right.
My previous. Oh, sorry.
If there's something attractive that you think would look better in HTML, but it isn't needed for bookkeeping purposes, it might be, a report or in your invitation as an example. And also if you had a set of records that were, you could export into HTML table and then just copy and paste that into your HTML.
Here's a report that runs on FileMaker every month. It's for an organization I belong to called Apple Core Dallas. It gives the membership and the treasurer's report and stuff. And as you can see, this is all generated with FileMaker and Wild. All of these things, that's just a Wild that spits them out and makes it into HTML. And this, I took time to make some CSS and put nice background on it, so you can obviously get a lot prettier. Of course, we've got the FMPUG one. Let's see if I've got.
Yeah, that's a good example.
FMPUG, FMPUG, there we go. I can't seem to find one. Well, there it is. Okay, everybody see that there? So that's all done with actually very basic, HTML. I did put some graphic around it, but everything actually right here is in one big table. And that's how I got the border around it. So that literally is one table with one cell, and I put all the text in. So anyway, and we put some pictures and stuff. There's mug shots and all.
Another thing that HTML email is really good for is if you want to send a receipt for a purchase that's made online or something like that, it's a lot classier to send an HTML email instead of a plain text. Plain text is kind of like primitive, old school, amateur kind of feel to it, whereas a nicely formatted HTML receipt sent to the purchaser is a whole lot nicer.
And also, when you're doing this, keep in mind a large number of people, like if you're sending receipts, are going to actually be reading these on a phone. So format it so the HTML works good on a phone format, because just expect that if you deal with the general public, they're going to be answering emails and seeing things like that on a phone. So format it skinny in the way that'll show up for it. But yes, it works great, and it certainly looks a lot more professional. So,
one thing you can do to make your emails more responsive to deal with various screen sizes is use media query, CSS media queries. There's a very limited amount of CSS that you can embed in an email, but that's one of them that does work. And so you can set the table width based on the screen size.
Another thing I will do is quite often, because I'm not an HTML developer, I will do the basics and I will generate the raw HTML the way it just has the basic data in there. And then I'll go to the company webmaster guy, say, add all the CSS and whatever you want to make this look good. And then I'll finish the FileMaker text calculation to make it spit it out. So usually what I end up doing, because I'm not a graphic artist and I'm not a web developer, I give them this basic HTML and I give it over to their web developer and I say, okay, add whatever you need into to make this look professional. And then I just make sure the dynamic parts of the fields are going in where they need to. So obviously, there's lots that can be done, and the more talented you are in the graphics end of things, proper UI, UX stuff that you can talk to Heather about, all the better. So anyway, well, we're running out of time here, so we need to cut things off as we hit our 12:30 point, but it's good having everybody here. We'll be meeting next month, and I'm trying to remember what was our next month meeting, I guess.
It's me.
Oh, here we go.
Standards, right?
There we go.
Yep.
Steve, yeah, so this shows, hopefully it's got our things up here. Okay, it's Steve doing our programming standards, and then we got Swift and FileMaker coming up, and then we got colors. And if you want to go see, for example, any of these in the past, we post the links to YouTube where they are. So if you want to go see Heather's transitioning to UX design, a mind shift, well, there it is. Go tackle it, and you can see it. It's quite interesting. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Heather. So,
Thank you.
okay, everybody, we'll see you next month, and good to have you here.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.